3 different doctors looked at me, then looked at my son, and quietly wrote the same word in my medical file. Dementia. My own son lowered his head, held my hand, and even pretended to cry. The nurses called him such a devoted son. I almost believed the performance myself. Almost, because while everyone else thought I was forgetting names, dates, and conversations, I remembered every single lie he'd told me during the past 18 months. 2 months later, we stood in a courtroom. My son sat beside his lawyer, asking the judge to take control of my money, my house, and the rest of my life. Everyone expected the judge to declare me mentally unfit. Instead, he looked directly at me, asked one simple question, and my son's entire plan collapsed in front of the whole courtroom. My name is William Anderson. I'm 78 years old. For 36 years, I was the principal of Lincoln High School in Columbus, Ohio. I spent my career teaching young people that character mattered more than talent. I believed honesty always found its way back, and for most of my life it did. After my wife, Margaret, passed away 6 years earlier, the house became painfully quiet. Every morning I still made 2 cups of coffee before remembering there was only one person left to drink it. My children worried about me, or at least that's what I thought. My daughter, Emily, lived in North Carolina. She called every Sunday without fail. But my son, Michael, lived only 20 minutes away. He started visiting almost every day. At first I was grateful. He mowed my lawn, fixed broken cabinets, took me grocery shopping. He'd smile and say, "Dad, you spent your whole life taking care of us. Now it's our turn." Those words warmed my heart. I never questioned his intentions. Then little things started happening. I'd tell Michael I paid the electric bill. The next day he'd ask, "Are you sure, Dad? You forgot last month." Except I hadn't. A week later he asked if I'd already eaten lunch. When I said yes, he smiled sadly. "No, Dad, that was yesterday." Again he was wrong, but he looked so confident I actually opened my refrigerator to check. For the first time in my life I questioned my own memory. A month later, Michael insisted I see a neurologist. "It's just routine," he said. "Lots of people your age get memory evaluations." I agreed, not because I thought something was wrong, because I trusted my son. The doctor asked simple questions. Today's date, the president's name, a list of 5 words. I answered everyone correctly. When the examination ended, the doctor smiled. "You've done very well today, Mr. Anderson." I thought that was the end of it, until Michael asked, "Doctor, could he be hiding the symptoms?" The room suddenly became quiet. The doctor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began asking more questions. Different questions. Harder ones. When we left the office, Michael wrapped his arm around my shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. We'll get through this together." I believed he was comforting me. I had no idea he had just planted the first seed of doubt in someone else's mind. Over the next several weeks, it happened again. At another doctor. And then another. Each time Michael spoke before I did, he repeats stories. He forgets appointments. He gets confused with money. Most of it simply wasn't true. But hearing the same claims over and over from my own son made them sound believable, even to me. One afternoon I stopped by my local bank. The branch manager, Susan Harper, had known me for almost 20 years. As she handed me a receipt, she smiled politely. "Your son is doing a wonderful job helping you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Oh, I assumed you knew." "Knew what?" He asked about becoming your financial guardian. The receipt slipped from my hand. I stared at her. My son asked what? Susan's smile disappeared. She suddenly realized I'd never been told. And in that moment, for the first time, I stopped wondering whether I was losing my memory and started wondering whether someone else was trying to make the world believe I had. I couldn't stop thinking about what Susan Harper had said. He asked about becoming your financial guardian. I drove home in complete silence. For 36 years, I'd taught students to pay attention when small things didn't make sense. Now those same lessons were coming back to me. Michael wasn't just helping me. He was building a story where I slowly lost my memory, and he became the hero taking care of his aging father. That evening, I opened the small notebook I'd kept since retiring. Margaret had given it to me on my 65th birthday. She smiled and said, "Bill, if you ever think your memory is slipping, write things down. The truth on paper never changes. For 13 years, I'd written something every single day: appointments, phone, calls, birthdays, bank deposits. Even what I had for dinner. I smiled sadly. Margaret probably never imagined that notebook would one day save me. The next morning, Michael showed up carrying breakfast. "Morning, Dad. Thought I'd bring your favorite pancakes." He looked cheerful. Almost too cheerful. While we ate, he casually asked, "Do you remember signing those insurance papers last week?" I looked at him. "What insurance papers?" He laughed softly. "See, you forgot already. I never signed insurance papers." He shook his head with fake concern. "It's okay. That's why I'm here." Something inside me whispered, "He's testing you." Instead of arguing, I quietly walked to my study, opened Margaret's notebook and checked last Tuesday. Every hour of the day was written there: dentist, hardware store, lunch with neighbor Frank, no insurance meeting, no paperwork, nothing. I closed the notebook. I hadn't forgotten. Someone wanted me to think I had. A few days later, my daughter Emily called.
"Dad, you sound tired."
"I've had a strange week." Michael had already called her. He'd told her, "Dad keeps forgetting things." Emily was worried. But unlike Michael, she didn't jump to conclusions. She asked one simple question. "Dad, have you actually forgotten anything?" I thought carefully, then answered honestly. "No, I keep being told I've forgotten." Silence. Then Emily quietly said, "Those are two very different things." For the first time in weeks, someone believed me. That Friday I had another appointment, this time with a memory specialist. Michael insisted on driving. Halfway there, he smiled. "Dad, what's today's date?" I answered immediately. "October 14th. He frowned. "No, it's the 15th. I looked out the window. The bank across the street had a digital sign. October 14th. He hadn't made a mistake. He'd lied. Just to see if I'd doubt myself. I didn't say a word. I simply looked back out the window. The examination lasted nearly 2 hours. The doctor asked difficult questions, remembering stories, drawing shapes, solving problems. When we finished, he smiled warmly. "Mr. Anderson, you performed remarkably well." I could see Michael's expression change. He wasn't expecting that. Then he leaned forward. "Doctor, my father has good days and bad days. At home, it's much worse." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "I understand," Michael continued. "He forgets conversations. He misplaces money. He gets confused." Every sentence sounded rehearsed, as if he'd practiced it. I wanted to interrupt, but something stopped me. Instead, I watched, because the more he talked, the more I realized he wasn't describing me. He was creating a version of me. That afternoon, I returned home alone. Michael said he had an important meeting. As I opened my mailbox, I noticed an official envelope. County Probate Court. My hands froze. Inside was a legal notice. Petition for adult guardianship. Petitioner Michael Anderson. Reason: progressive dementia and inability to manage finances. The hearing date was only 3 weeks away. I sat down on my front porch, reading the papers again and again. My own son wasn't just telling people I had dementia anymore. He was asking a judge to take away my legal right to make my own decisions. Then I reached the final page. At the bottom was the list of evidence he planned to use against me. Medical records, bank statements, witness testimony, and one item that made my heart stop. A handwritten letter, supposedly written by me, admitting I could no longer trust my own memory. I had never written such a letter, which meant only one thing. Someone had forged my handwriting. For nearly 5 minutes, I couldn't move. The court papers rested in my lap. The words blurred together. Petition for adult guardianship, filed by my own son. I read the final page again. There it was. Exhibit D, a handwritten statement from William Anderson admitting that his memory was failing and requesting his son, Michael Anderson, to manage all financial and legal affairs. I whispered to myself, I never wrote this, not even close. I walked straight into my study, opened the old oak filing cabinet. Inside, every birthday card, every tax return, every handwritten letter I'd written over the past 20 years was neatly organized. I pulled out 3 notebooks and placed them beside the alleged confession. One glance was enough. The handwriting looked similar, but it wasn't mine. Whoever copied it had studied my writing. The letters matched. The spacing matched, but one tiny detail didn't. For 40 years I had always crossed the letter T from left to right. Always. The confession crossed every T from right to left. Most people would never notice. A handwriting expert would, and I certainly did. That evening I called only one person, Rebecca Hayes. She had been my attorney for almost 15 years. More importantly, she had written Margaret's will. When she arrived, she quietly read every page, then looked at me. "Bill, did you sign any of these documents?" "No." "Did you ever tell Michael you wanted him to control your finances?" "Never." She nodded. "I believed that before you answered." I frowned. "Why?" She smiled gently. "Because I know you. You've planned every major decision in your life. A man like you doesn't suddenly hand over everything without talking to his lawyer first." She continued reading. Halfway through, she stopped. "This doctor's report." "What about it?" "It doesn't actually diagnose dementia." I leaned forward. "It doesn't?" She shook her head. "No, it simply says, further evaluation recommended." Rebecca placed another document beside it. Michael highlighted one sentence and ignored the rest. The rest clearly stated, "The patient remains capable of making legal and financial decisions at this time." I stared at her. So he changed the meaning. He didn't change the report. He changed the story. Rebecca closed the folder. "Bill, I need to ask something." "Go ahead." "Do you want to fight this?" I almost laughed. "Fight it?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "If the court grants guardianship, you lose control of your bank accounts, your investments, your house, even medical decisions. They could decide where you live." The room became completely silent. Rebecca softly added, "This isn't just paperwork. This is your independence." I answered without hesitation. "Then yes, we fight." The next morning, Emily drove nearly 9 hours from North Carolina. The moment she walked through the front door, she hugged me tightly. Then she quietly asked, "Dad, tell me the truth. Are you forgetting things?" I smiled. "I remember every birthday you've ever celebrated. I remember the blue dress your mother wore on our first date. I remember the exact words you whispered when you graduated college." Emily smiled through tears, then whispered, "You remembered something I forgot." That afternoon, Rebecca filed our official response with the court. Michael would no longer be the only one presenting evidence. Now we would... As Rebecca packed her briefcase, her phone rang. She listened for a few seconds, then looked at me. Her expression changed completely. "Bill, the court just appointed an independent medical examiner. Is that bad?" "No, it's fair." She paused. "But Michael objected immediately." I frowned. "Why would he object?" Rebecca slowly closed her phone. "Because if you're examined by someone he didn't choose, his entire case could collapse." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Just let the court help you." For the first time, I wasn't reading a message from a worried son. I was reading a message from a man who was afraid his lies were about to be tested. Michael's text stayed on my screen for a long time. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Just let the court help you." The words sounded caring, almost loving. But after everything I'd learned, I heard something completely different. He wasn't asking me to accept help. He was asking me to surrender. The following Monday, Rebecca drove me to the office of Dr. Daniel Foster. He wasn't connected to Michael. He wasn't hired by my lawyer. The court had chosen him, exactly the way it should be. As we entered the waiting room, I noticed Michael sitting across from us. He stood immediately. "Dad!" I nodded politely. "Michael." For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. "It doesn't have to end like this." I looked at him. It already did. Dr. Foster invited me into his office alone. "The court asked me to evaluate your mental capacity." "I understand." "For the next 2 hours, I'm not interested in what anyone says about you. I'm only interested in you." For the first time in weeks, someone wanted to hear my voice, not my son's, mine. The examination was unlike any I'd taken before. He asked me to solve problems, explain current events, describe how I managed my monthly finances. We discussed history, books, even baseball. At one point he smiled. "You were a principal?" For 36 years. What was the hardest part? I answered without hesitation. Convincing teenagers that every choice has consequences. He laughed. That's probably still true. Near the end, he placed a blank sheet of paper in front of me. Mr. Anderson, I'd like you to write a short letter. About what? Anything you want. I thought for a moment. Then I wrote about Margaret. About the first time I saw her at the county fair. About the red sweater she wore. About the way she always insisted on dancing in the kitchen while dinner burned. When I finished, Dr. Foster quietly read every word, then looked up. Your memory is remarkable. I smiled, so my wife always told me. As I opened the office door, I found Michael pacing the hallway. How did it go? Before I could answer, Dr. Foster stepped outside. I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson. Michael smiled confidently. I knew my father would cooperate. Dr. Foster interrupted him. I wasn't speaking to your father. I was speaking to you. The hallway became silent. Dr. Foster folded his arms. I've reviewed 3 previous evaluations. They all mentioned concerns, but none of them diagnosed dementia. Michael shifted nervously. I told you my father's symptoms come and go. Dr. Foster looked directly into his eyes. No, they don't. What do you mean? I've spent 30 years evaluating cognitive disorders. Today, I found no evidence that your father lacks the capacity to manage his own affairs. Michael's face turned pale. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Michael forced a smile. Maybe he just had a good day. Dr. Foster shook his head. Capacity isn't measured by luck. It's measured by consistent reasoning. And your father demonstrated that throughout this evaluation. Michael's jaw tightened. But I've seen him forget things. Dr. Foster calmly replied, forgetfulness is common. So is aging. Neither automatically equals dementia. As Rebecca and I walked toward the parking lot, she smiled for the first time in weeks. That went better than I expected. I nodded. So it's over? She stopped walking. I wish it were. What do you mean? She reached into her briefcase. The judge just approved one more witness. I frowned. Who? She handed me the notice. I read the name once, then again. My heart sank. Frank Miller, my best friend of 43 years, the man I'd trusted almost as much as family. According to Michael's filing, Frank was prepared to testify that I'd been forgetting people, losing money and showing signs of dementia for more than a year. I looked up at Rebecca. There has to be some mistake. She slowly shook her head. No, Bill, there isn't. Someone had convinced my oldest friend to testify against me. I read Frank Miller's name 3 times. It still didn't feel real. Frank wasn't just my best friend. He was the man who stood beside me at my wedding. The man who carried Margaret's casket with me. The man who taught my son how to fish. If Frank believed I had dementia, the judge would listen. And so would I. That evening I drove to Frank's house. His old blue pickup was parked in the driveway. He opened the door before I even knocked. Bill, he looked surprised. I was just thinking about you. I smiled. Were you? He stepped aside. Come in. We sat at the same kitchen table, where we'd played cards every Friday. For nearly 20 years, neither of us touched the coffee. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Frank, did you tell the court I have dementia? He lowered his eyes. Yes. Those 2 letters hurt more than anything Michael had done. Why? Frank rubbed his forehead. Because I believed your son. He said you'd gotten lost driving home. You forgot my birthday. You called him 3 times asking the same question. I interrupted quietly. Frank, I've never been to your birthday. He looked confused. What? Your birthday is October 2nd. You've spent every birthday for the last 15 years, visiting your daughter in Arizona. Silence, complete silence. Frank blinked twice, then slowly whispered, You're right. I continued. And I never got lost. My car broke down. You drove me home yourself. His face turned pale. For the next 30 minutes, we went through every story Michael had told him. One by one. Each time I opened Margaret's notebook. Every phone call. Every doctor's appointment. Every receipt. Every date. Everything was written down. Frank compared my notebook to his own calendar. The dates matched perfectly. Michael's stories didn't. Frank leaned back in his chair. My God, I never checked. I just trusted him. I smiled sadly.
So did I.
He covered his face with both hands. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't know I was helping him. For the first time that day, I didn't feel angry. I felt sorry for both of us. We'd been manipulated by the same person, just in different ways. Frank suddenly stood. I'm fixing this. He walked to his desk, pulled out his phone, and dialed Rebecca Hayes. When she answered, he spoke without hesitation. My name is Frank Miller. I gave a statement supporting Michael Anderson. I need to withdraw every word. Rebecca remained silent while he explained everything. When the call ended, Frank looked at me. I'll testify, but this time I'll tell the truth. 2 days later, the courtroom was nearly full. Neighbors, friends, even a few former teachers I'd worked with years ago. Michael sat at the petitioner's table. He looked confident, until Frank walked through the courtroom doors. Michael's smile disappeared instantly. He wasn't supposed to be here, at least not on my side. As Frank took the witness stand, Michael's attorney smiled. Mr. Miller, you've known William Anderson for over 40 years? Yes. And you've observed signs of memory loss? Frank looked toward Michael, then toward me. He took a long breath. I need to correct my previous statement. The attorney frowned. What do you mean? Frank sat a little straighter. I believed William had dementia because I trusted his son. I was wrong. I never saw William lose his memory. I saw Michael repeat the same story so many times that I eventually believed it. The attorney immediately objected. Your Honor. The judge raised his hand. Overruled. Frank continued. I came here today because I refuse to help destroy the reputation of an innocent man. Michael stared at the floor. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked frightened. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. As Rebecca stood to call our next witness, she quietly leaned toward me and whispered, Bill, the judge has just received something neither side expected. I frowned. What is it? She smiled slightly. A package delivered anonymously this morning, and according to the clerk, it contains video recordings. Video recordings that could either save my life or destroy it forever. The courtroom fell completely silent. Rebecca leaned closer and whispered, The judge just received an anonymous package. I frowned. What's inside? She shook her head. We don't know yet. But whatever it is, it was delivered directly to the court clerk this morning. Across the room, Michael looked confused. His lawyer looked even more nervous. Neither of them had expected this. Judge Robert Collins adjusted his glasses. The court has received new evidence. He looked toward both attorneys. Before I decide whether to admit it, I want both sides to review its contents. The bailiff carried a sealed brown envelope to the front. Rebecca carefully opened it. Inside were 3 flash drives, a stack of printed emails, and 1 handwritten note. She read the note silently, then looked at me. Bill, I think someone finally decided to tell the truth. The judge allowed both attorneys 20 minutes to review the material. Michael's lawyer plugged the first flash drive into his laptop. Within seconds, his confident expression disappeared. He immediately whispered something to Michael. Michael grabbed the laptop, watched the screen, then slowly leaned back in his chair. He looked like all the blood had drained from his face. Rebecca turned the laptop toward me. The video had no sound at first. It showed the conference room of Michael's construction company. The date stamp read 7 months earlier. Michael was sitting across from another man, Victor Lewis, a financial consultant I'd never met. The two of them appeared to be discussing paperwork. Then the audio began. Victor slid a folder across the table. Your father's credit is perfect. Michael didn't answer. Victor continued. If the court ever questions anything, we simply document cognitive decline. Michael looked uncomfortable. I don't like lying. Victor smiled. You won't be lying. You'll just be helping everyone notice what they already expect from a 78-year-old man. My stomach turned. Victor continued. People don't question dementia. They assume it. And once doctors start hearing the same concerns, they begin writing them down.
Michael lowered his head.
I just need enough time to save my business. Victor leaned back. Then your father becomes the guardian's problem. The video ended. The courtroom remained silent. No one moved. No one even coughed. Judge Collins slowly removed his glasses, then looked toward Michael. Mr. Anderson, is that you in the recording? Michael didn't answer. His attorney quietly touched his arm. "You have the right to remain silent." Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to play the second recording." The judge nodded. "Proceed." This one came from a restaurant security camera. Michael and Victor sat in a corner booth. Their conversation was crystal clear. Victor asked, "When are you filing for guardianship?" Michael answered, "After the third doctor." Victor smiled. "Perfect. 3 opinions always sound more convincing than one. And your father still trusts you?" Michael looked down at his coffee. "He trusts me with everything." Victor laughed. "Good. That'll make this much easier." I closed my eyes. Those words hurt more than anything else I'd heard. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I had trusted him with everything. When the recording ended, Judge Collins folded his hands. He looked at Michael for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Mr. Anderson, would you like to explain these recordings before this court? Reaches any conclusions?" For the first time, Michael looked completely broken. His eyes filled with tears. He slowly stood up, then turned. Not toward the judge, not toward his lawyer, but toward me. "Dad," his voice cracked, "I never wanted it to go this far." The entire courtroom waited, because everyone knew whatever Michael said next would determine the rest of both our lives. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioner humming above us. Michael stood frozen, his shoulders trembled. His attorney whispered, "You don't have to say anything." But Michael wasn't looking at his lawyer. He was looking at me. The same way he used to look at me when he was 10 years old and had broken a window with a baseball. Except this time there was no simple apology that could fix what he'd done. "Dad," his voice cracked, "I'm sorry." No one moved, no one interrupted him. "I never planned to steal your life. I just kept making one bad decision after another." Judge Collins leaned forward. "Mr. Anderson, did you knowingly exaggerate your father's medical condition?" Michael slowly nodded. "Yes." "Did you tell multiple physicians that your father had symptoms you never personally witnessed?" "Yes." "Did you file this guardianship petition believing your father was mentally incapable?" Michael closed his eyes. "No." The entire courtroom gasped. Judge Collins remained calm. "Then why did you file it?" Michael wiped his eyes. "My construction company was collapsing. I owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. I couldn't get another loan. The bank wouldn't approve me, so Victor told me guardianship would let me refinance Dad's investments." He looked toward me. "I convinced myself I'd pay everything back before you ever found out." Rebecca quietly stood. "Mr. Anderson, so this was never about protecting your father?" Michael shook his head. "No, it was about saving myself. I listened without saying a word, not because I wasn't angry, because I wanted to hear every single truth, without excuses, without interruptions." For the first time in months, Michael wasn't performing. He wasn't pretending to be the perfect son. He was simply telling the truth. Judge Collins reviewed his notes, then looked directly at me. "Mr. Anderson, I have one question for you." The courtroom became completely silent. This was the question everyone had been waiting for, the question that would decide everything. The judge asked, without looking at any notes, "Can you tell this court what happened on the morning of April 16th? I smiled gently. "I can tell you the entire day." I described eating breakfast at 7:15 a.m., driving to the hardware store, buying 2 cans of white paint, stopping for coffee at 8:43 a.m., talking to the cashier about the Ohio State football game, returning home, receiving a phone call from Emily at exactly 2:18 p.m. Then I reached into my briefcase, pulled out Margaret's notebook, and opened it to April 16th. Every detail matched perfectly, down to the minute. Judge Collins compared the notebook to the receipts Rebecca had submitted into evidence. Every timestamp matched. Every location matched. Everything. The judge slowly closed the notebook, then looked toward the courtroom. "I have presided over guardianship cases for nearly 20 years. I have seen genuine dementia. I have seen families torn apart by memory loss." He paused. "This is not one of those cases." He turned toward Michael. "What concerns this court is not Mr. Anderson's memory. It's the deliberate effort to make others doubt it."
Michael lowered his head.
Tears fell onto the table. Judge Collins looked toward the bailiff. The petition for guardianship is denied. A wave of relief washed over me, but the judge wasn't finished. He looked directly at Michael. And based upon the evidence presented today, I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor for investigation into possible fraud, forgery, and filing false statements with the court. Michael's attorney closed his eyes. He knew the case had completely collapsed. As people slowly began leaving the courtroom, a deputy walked quickly toward Judge Collins, handed him a sealed envelope, and whispered something that made the judge's expression suddenly change. He immediately looked at me. "Mr. Anderson, I think you'd better stay. There's one more piece of evidence, and it changes everything." The courtroom had almost emptied. Michael sat quietly at the defense table. His shoulders were slumped. For the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't trying to win. He looked like a man who had finally realized he'd already lost. Judge Robert Collins looked toward me. "Mr. Anderson, please remain seated." I nodded. The deputy handed the judge a sealed envelope. Inside was another letter. This one wasn't anonymous. It had a return address, Lincoln High School Alumni Association. The judge smiled slightly. "I think this belongs to you." I looked confused. "To me?" He nodded. "It was delivered this morning, after someone heard about today's hearing." I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were nearly 200 handwritten letters from former students, people I'd taught over 4 decades. The first one read, "Mr. Anderson, you taught me integrity isn't what people say about you. It's what you've already proven when nobody is watching. If anyone questions your character, they don't know the man who changed my life." Another read, "You believed in me when no one else did. I believe in you now." Then another, and another. Doctors, teachers, police officers, veterans, business owners, all writing the same thing. "We trust William Anderson." My hands began to shake. Not from fear, from gratitude. Judge Collins quietly looked around the courtroom. "I've read dozens of guardianship cases, but I've never seen this." He held up one of the letters. "This isn't evidence of memory. It's evidence of character." Then he looked directly at Michael. "You spent months trying to convince people your father couldn't be trusted. Yet hundreds of people who owe him nothing came forward to defend him." The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, based on today's testimony and the recordings, the state intends to open a criminal investigation into fraud and filing false statements." Michael didn't argue. He simply nodded. "I understand." Then he slowly stood, walked toward me, and stopped. "I don't deserve another chance." "No, you probably don't." His eyes filled with tears. "But I still hope someday you'll remember me as your son, not the man who tried to take everything from you." I looked at him for a long moment, then quietly answered, "I'll always remember you're my son. But you'll have to decide what kind of son you want to be from today forward." 6 months later, Michael accepted a plea agreement. He avoided prison because he admitted his crimes early, cooperated fully, and repaid every dollar he had improperly taken control of during the guardianship attempt. The court ordered him to perform community service and attend financial ethics counseling. Judge Collins made one final remark before ending the case. "Greed didn't destroy this family. Lies did." A year later, Emily and I were sitting on my front porch, the same porch where this nightmare had begun. She smiled.
"Dad."
"Do you know what everyone still talks about?" I laughed. "The trial?" She shook her head. "No, the question." I smiled. Judge Collins had asked only one question, not because that single question proved I didn't have dementia, but because it gave me the chance to be heard. For months, everyone had been listening to people talking about me. That day, someone finally listened to me. Sometimes, that's all the truth needs. That evening, I opened Margaret's notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote, "Never let someone else tell your story while you're still able to tell it yourself." Then I closed the notebook, placed it back in the drawer, and smiled, because I hadn't won a court case. I'd kept something far more valuable, my voice, the end.